Tiene ahora una presentación que estábamos esperando, muchos de nosotros, la verdad. Le vamos a dar la bienvenida a Lake Day. Ella va a hacer, esto es importante, ella va a hacer su exposición en inglés, así que si es que quieren escucharla en español, pueden ir a la opción de traducción simultánea al español. Para acceder a esta opción, refresquen la pantalla y dentro del botón de biblioteca de videos, después de refrescar la pantalla, busquen la sesión que se llama traducción simultánea. Les cuento un poco sobre Lake. Ella es socia de LDB Partners, fondo de inversión con foco de inversión en Deep Tech y en inteligencia artificial. Además, es profesora adjunta de Carnegie Mellon University. Lake tiene una tremenda trayectoria liderando equipos de desarrollo de productos, de ingeniería, es experta en plataformas, marketplace, móviles, algoritmos, motores de búsqueda, aplicaciones, como dicen en inglés, you name it. Pero además tiene la particularidad de conocer muy bien el mercado chino. Saben que fue la empleada número 84 de Alibaba. Y por supuesto también conoce, porque trabaja ahí, el mercado estadounidense. Parte de su interés, además de construir puentes entre ambos países, es también ser una impulsora de la participación femenina en las empresas tecnológicas. Lake, we're so glad to have you here today. I'm so sorry my introduction took so long, but well, that's what basically happens when you have such an impressive career and so many achievements. So we're very looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. I apologize, my Spanish is this much, so I have to use English.
Please go ahead. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. With that, please project my presentation. All right, so today we're going to talk about, well, first of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the previous presentation. I think that it really set up a good stage for what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to go over use cases and data in AI space. So we already have my introduction, so I'm going to skip here. So as we know that AI is not really a new concept. So AI has been around in the 50s. But what really accelerated AI in the last 5 or even 10 years are 3 elements. The first one is the computing power. Computing power is particularly that was enabled by NVIDIA GPU, parallel computing. And the second element is data. Data has been grown exceptionally, and we're going to cover that later. And the third one is algorithm. So with the innovations in natural language processing and computer vision, we now have different models, particularly some of the models that specialize for different verticals and different use cases. So there are 4 industries, based on our observation, currently spend over 50% worldwide spending. So those are 4 categories: are retail, financial services, healthcare, and manufacturing. So in retail, we have seen a number of different use cases. Customer service engagement, for example, the chatbot that we just saw in early presentation. So now you make a purchase in Amazon or retail, or even want to purchase product in or consult at the doctors or lawyers. Quite often you will see a chatbot. So chatbot is a natural language application that tailored for customer service and engagement. Demand prediction and product pricing recommendation, we see that quite often as well. So for example, for e-commerce, if you want to understand what is the latest trend, the color, the pattern, demand prediction in that for image recognition and categorization is actually quite useful. The other thing is to pick up the sentiment in social media to understand what are the latest trends. So that is based on NLP. Supply chain and logistic management to understand the demand, and particularly, for example, in the last mile delivery, to understand what route is most optimal, what packages and in what size should go into specific trucks is one of the use cases. And then we have a payment processing and product design. So for product design, I thought it would be great to show some of the examples. Oh, okay. So I don't have the slide here, but product design here is, so for example, we have seen co-design in fabric and fashion. We have seen 3D printing co-design. In this case, for example, if you think about a chair that in the past that was purely designed by human, but now giving the goal, for example, least material and lowest cost, but still will give you same strength and structure. Or sometimes with the fashion infusion, for example, I want a Picasso structure or pattern or influence, then you can co-design the product. So on manufacturing, we have seen manufacturing as one of the earliest industries that adopt machine learning in optimizing manufacturing process and predict maintenance. Maintenance, for example, the production line was traditionally scheduled by time, so time-based scheduling. So now is switching to prediction maintenance schedule, which means that using computer vision, we see the issues and defects and our different challenges, and then we can schedule maintenance accordingly. Supply and demand forecasting on inventories and also on the parts and also potentially purchases is also help to optimize the production speed. Quality assurance, so inspection of the material, not only just from large items, but also nowadays we can do at semiconductor level, the micro level. And we also have logistic management and material waste as planned. So material waste, and I actually give you one specific example, is that you can see, for example, in fabric usage. So for example, in a fashion business, how it was done, it was you cut a specific shape of one piece, but a lot of other edge pieces are actually wasted. So now using this prediction is, okay, so how do I design the different pieces and maximize the usage of the fabric? We have seen those use cases now. Okay, so there you go. So the product design, and I was mentioned earlier, so this is actually one of the examples you can see that AI using understand the fabric and try to design and different type of fashions. As you can see, that some are make sense, some are don't, but this is a very good start of co-design with AI. Cheers. As in my previous examples, so these are the 3D generative design and 3D printing that we have seen. So those are the chairs. It actually looks pretty futuristic. And this is a wooden chair, and this is a scooter connectors. As you can see, this structure is not really traditional done. And then this is something that you can see that with the hollow hole here, actually give a lightweight, but same strength of the structure for the connecting parts. Okay, so healthcare. So healthcare is one of the largest spendings predicted in the next 3-4 years, in particular given pandemic. So we have a number of things here. Hold on a second. So we have a number of use cases here. So patient monitoring system using computer vision and robotics. There is also a speak assistant as well. And we have a clinical flow optimization. So today, medical record in the United States are all scattered in different places. So how do you have holistic patient record and also optimize the flow, and how does a patients go into different protocols? And that's another very strong use case. Image diagnosis is probably one of the most being talked about. So think about the X-ray for lung cancer or lung infections. And so nowadays that using computer vision is a very efficient way and very accurate compared to human doctors in diagnosis. So drug treatment and discovery is a huge part for example, understanding different compounds and understand how we can make different compounds to make new drugs, and toxicity, and also, for example, in cancer research, how do you discover new target? And that's widely used as well. A new area has been watched. So clinical trial participation. Clinical trial is necessary for FDA approval, but it's also very lengthy and expensive process. Typically, even for startup, sometimes in order to go through some of the clinical trials of new either devices or new drugs or new treatment, the spendings easily go through several millions or tens of millions. A lot of money were spent because we don't know how do we recruit the target, how do we manage the process. So in recruiting, identify right potential participants, enrollment, and manage the process. AI has been playing a very, very important role in this specific use cases. Personalized care, particularly I want to mention doses management. So imagine today, as we get older, we're going to have a cocktail of all different kind of drugs, or you're in the middle of a process of getting treatment. And quite often you're going to have many different drugs, but we are all coming different sizes and different tolerance. And so it makes a lot of sense to have personalized doses, and also to understand how those different drugs interact with each other to give you the safest combination. So insurance fraud detection and outcome assessment, and that's another trend. So U.S. insurance is moving towards from the process treatment reimbursement to outcome reimbursement, which means we do need to monitor how patients reacting to different drugs, and what's the outcome, drugs and the surgery and different treatment, what's the outcome, so to define that how much insurance reimbursement should be paid. Okay, so I actually just want to give quick examples. Is that in 2020, February 3rd, and this is the very beginning of a pandemic spread, we had students came from Oxford talk about using machine learning statistics and machine learning models to predict a wild spread pandemic. And then that was very early, and there was still debate: is it going to be pandemic? Is it going to be serious? But what he did has actually been using travel models, right? So not only just the spread of the disease, but also how fast, how he was predicting all the different flights across different continents, and try to predict the speed. And that was, I want to bring it up because it's really relevant to today's world. So the last one I want to quickly go over is the financial services. So this is an area that people are probably a little more familiar with. So we understand that compliance, fraud detections, payment processing, and algorithm trading by hedge funds, and nowadays crypto funds as well. And then there's a process of automation. Targeted marketing is one area has been spending a lot of money by credit card companies or financial product companies. We all get tons of junk mail. So using target marketing to understand your customers and patients, customers, and then provide the right financial product is the area that being used often. I do want to talk a little bit about privacy issue here, because as you can see that in order to provide more information or better product, and then you probably need to get more personalized data. And that's what's the area that's huge debate, is how much information is needed and how do we provide privacy of the customers. So to facilitate all the use cases I'm talking about, as you can see that there are more and more data are generated on an accelerated pace. So we're here right now, 2022, the beginning. As you can see, this is the very beginning of how much data will be created. And it's really get to the point that then make people to think is that, okay, so there's so much data over here, and how do we capture this data? How do we digest the data? And how do we protect this data? So how much data actually being put in work? So this is interesting research in 2020 by storage company Seagate and also IDC. So of all the data we've been talking about, so currently only 56% of the data has been captured through operations. And of the 56%, as you can see, that only 57% of it has been really exploited. So unused, uncaptured based on the simple model is 68%. But we have observed in the recent research is that we have indicated over 90% of the data collected by enterprise may not be usable. The reasons are the threefold. Duplications. So if you collect data from different resources and different sources, what you happen to see is that there are likelihood duplication of the data you collected, or some of the metrics of the data, some of the vectors and metadata are actually duplications. So the first thing you do when you collect data is dedupe, which means remove the duplications. And then in order for the data to make sense, then we do need to label the data. So before we talk about label data, then we really have to understand why do we have to label data? Because data come in two different categories. Structured data, which have labels, and unstructured data, which currently, for example, think about images and videos, or the information, for example, Twitter data, right? So some are structured, but majority content of the text is not structured. You don't know what people are talking about. So in medical industry, if you think about the data, what we're seeing so far is roughly about 80% of the data, medical records actually are images and videos. So it's really important to understand what all those informations are. But there is capacity and expertise needed to label the data. So imagine I can probably label as a everyday person that I can probably label in autonomous driving. So what is a curb, what is a vehicle, what is a human across the street, and those are things that are common and that we can categorize it. I can also label what is a dog and what is a cat, what is a horse. However, when you get to the area that requires domain expertise, think about to label a cancer cell versus normal cell, to label a defect in semiconductor chips, you need expertise. As you see, from previous slide, as the data is exploding, and in order to have all this data, in particular video data, think about how many frames. 1 minute, 1 minute of video is how many frames of images. It's a tremendous amount of time. It's not best use of domain experts to sit there every day to analyze the data. So that's the gap that we're seeing today. So how do we face those challenges? As we know that over collecting data, we have a lot of cost of the storage, or difficult to retrieve when you have much database, bigger database, and to try to retrieve useful information. Data will expire, and then there's a privacy and security concerns as growing your data holdings. So there are a few recommendations I want to share with the audience here. So this actually recommendations coming from all the practitioners that I've talked at Carnegie Mellon. So every year at my ex-A.i class, I'll invite 7 or 8 industry leaders, for example, VPs of data or cloud from companies like Google, Twitter, Apple, Square, Scale AI. So all those different categories will come over to talk about how they've been using data. So I want to summarize into 5 solutions. The first one look pretty straightforward. It means that define use case and the outcome. So why do I use this as the first strategy? Is that if you're cooking and you when you do the shopping for the cooking, it will more efficient when you know what you're going to cook, you know the recipe, and you can go to the store and select the recipe very quickly. And here's the same story here. So imagine for face recognition, right? So if you have a face recognition application, it will be good to understand what you're trying to do. So if as a civilian video, what I'm trying to do is to identify one specific person. That would be much easier. So in the crowd, all I need to do is to understand who I'm giving the security pass, allow this person into the gate. So all I need to do is to understand the 3D face model of that specific person. However, if the outcome, the problem you want to solve, is to understand in this audience I'm monitoring in the subway, is there any suspicious activity? And then first of all, you have to identify what is suspicious activity. And then you monitor almost every person in that crowd to understand. So as you can see that the computing power and algorithm become much more complicated. So explore hypothesis. So hypothesizing here is that, we have in a way that when you're creating model that you do want to understand that what could be to giving us a few assumptions that this could be possibly work, and then you run the model, train the model, and then you validate whether the assumptions are correct or not. So that way we can start with a light version of the model, and then we grow more information, more data to validate it. Optimize the human in loop. I'm going to talk a little more in detail in the latest slide. And then consider simple algorithm. So we know today that the deep learning is also a subcategory of machine learning. So quite often people ask me, so I have this tremendous, complicated but very advanced model for this specific problem. But sometimes you look at the problem, a simple model, much simple model, doesn't have to be unsupervised model. It can be supervised model or even regression model, can deliver much better result quickly and cheaper. And then we can leverage public data. There are actually quite a bit of public data out there. So let's go over what is a human in loop. Human in the loop, by definition, is to let humans input and involve human in training and toning. For example, we let the machine run for a cycle, and we have a human come in and decide whether it's right or not, and then that goes back to the system, continue to train as a cycle. And what I want to emphasize here is that adaptive learning model make human in the loop much more efficient. What does it mean? It means the machine actually is trained to understand what your picks are. So in the right example here is a company called Lowstar. It's a startup that created annotation tools that leverage adaptive learning. So what they do is that they give you, let's say, 100 pictures at the beginning. As you start annotate, okay, in this green plant, what is a green tomato, right? And the machine will pre-select the field for you. As you making the selections, the machine in the background will understand what your choices are being, and then shuffling with the next 10 pictures should present it to you for annotation. Using tools like this, it really can shrink your annotation time by significant percentages. So I'm not talking about 1 to 10, where I'm talking 1 to hundreds or even thousands, that ratio of time and efforts. So lastly, I just want to share a quick example of how much public data is out there. So in this left example, PubChem, so if you want to look into how many compounds out there, how many information out there, so this is actually, you can see that you can see 25 million patents here and 32 million literature here, and 111 million compounds out there already public available for you to search. And then in GTC data portal, you can see that there are already 23,000 genes and 3.2 million mutations for you for research. So I highly encourage people to think about, before you acquiring data, think about what are the public data out there available for you to use. So I know we only have 15 minutes. The last thing I want to share is we know that famous quote from Spider-Man is, with great power comes a great responsibility. So anyone that in the AI space, particularly those ones that we have access to the data, we're creating algorithm, we're creating applications, always think about, and when AI gave you great power to creating so many new applications, efficiencies, and reduction costs, that comes with responsibility as well. How do we protect data? How we protect privacy? And what does the application do on the flip side? So once again, thank you very much for having me here. And this is my LinkedIn profile. And then you're welcome to connect with me or follow me. Thank you again for having me here.
Thank you so much, Lake, for being with us this morning.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a great day.